From Recorded Future News and PRX, this is Click Here. Hey there, it's Dina. A quick note before we start. As you know, twice a month we team up with WAMU and NPR's 1A news magazine for something we call Cyber Monday. And this time, 1A's Jen White starts with a question that's becoming increasingly urgent. What happens when a technology starts finding ways around the rules that we built for it? She begins with AI. Recent tests by OpenAI and Anthropic ended with their models getting access to real systems out in the world they weren't supposed to reach. So, Jen asks what those incidents tell us about AI, and whether the people building it are moving faster than our ability to keep it under control. I join Jen later in the hour when we take that conversation back more than half a century to a blind kid named Joe Ingressia who discovered he could manipulate the telephone network with nothing but a whistle. He later called himself Joy Bubbles and helped inspire the subculture that gave rise to modern hacking. We told his story on Click Here back in July. Today, Jen picks up that story with me and filmmaker Rachel Morrison, and we use it to ask a bigger question. What can the earliest hackers teach us about the technologies we're struggling to understand now? First up, AI gets out of the sandbox. Stay with us. From Recorded Future News and PRX, this is Click Here.
This is 1A. I'm Jen White. The pioneers of artificial intelligence promise that in the not-so-distant future, AI tools will work on our behalf. A key part of that vision is AI agents, software systems that run by themselves and can use reasoning to complete multi-step tasks on behalf of humans. Well, agents can do all sorts of things on their own, from booking flights and dinner reservations to coding websites and applying for jobs. But what happens when these advanced AI models go rogue to accomplish the task you've given them? That's what happened at OpenAI. The company was testing its AI agent's hacking capability. In late July, OpenAI revealed that two of its models hacked into the AI platform Hugging Face and several other sites to accomplish the task it was given. The company says its models broke out of a closed testing environment with lowered safeguards called a sandbox to do the hacking. And it's not the only company with a hacking problem. Now, Anthropic, the AI company behind the chatbot Claude, says some of its models hacked into 3 separate companies' systems during routine testing as early as April. Today on 1A, what concerns do these hacking incidents raise about cybersecurity in the age of AI? And as leading AI developers call for more regulation, how will these hacks affect the pace of AI development? Joining us from New York is Hadass Gold. She's a correspondent at CNN covering AI. Hadass, welcome back to the program.
Hi, great to be with you.
Now, Hadass, Anthropic says it didn't even notice its models had hacked into these company systems during testing until it conducted an internal review after the OpenAI hack became public. Anthropic also says none of the affected companies recognized they'd been hacked. So how did such a serious cybersecurity breach fly under the radar on both sides?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions still to be answered by these AI companies because even OpenAI wasn't the first one to notice its agent hacking. It was Hugging Face, the one who had been hacked, who were the ones that realized that they were under attack. And in Anthropic's case, it's almost even more alarming because they didn't even know that their agents had done something similar until they were prompted to review their systems after OpenAI's incident. They said they reviewed more than 141,000 evaluations, and in that found those 3 incidents where their agents did not exactly escape the sandbox, but managed to access the open internet when they weren't supposed to and hack into these other companies. In the Anthropic case, as you noted, the companies themselves weren't necessarily aware of it either. It's possible, we don't know the exact details, but it's possible that what these agents were doing was just sort of like looking for information. The agents were on this capture the flag game where they were told to retrieve information from another place that was supposed to be locked. It was supposed to be this sort of cybersecurity test. So it is totally possible that these other companies just didn't notice the intrusion because it was just to retrieve information and bring it back. But you would hope that these companies would have noticed that an unauthorized agent of some kind was hacking into their systems. But it goes to illustrate how good these agents are now, what they can do, what they're capable of, even when they're in the hands of the ostensible good guys, but it's an experiment essentially gone wrong.
And just help us better understand, Hadass, what these companies were testing exactly. You said it was sort of a capture the flag task.
So in both cases, OpenAI's and Anthropic's, they were testing the capabilities of their models. An agent is essentially an AI model that can take multiple steps on its own. So instead of a chatbot that you just ask a question to and it responds, you give it a task such as go create a whole website for me and find me customers, and it will do all of that for you, taking all of those many, many steps by itself and making decisions by itself. And so in this case, they were doing cybersecurity evaluations. You want to test your models and your agents, see what they're fully capable of. And so in order to do that, just like you would with a car, or with a product, or with anything that you're creating, they create a lab environment for it called a sandbox, where they're able to, in theory, remove the safety guardrails. So if it's like a car, imagine that you remove any sort of limits on its speed, or maybe you get rid of some airbags, something like that, because you want to see what happens when you drive it as fast as possible. And so with these models, they remove the safety guardrails that would normally be in place before they're released to anybody outside of these companies, just to see what they can do. And they give them challenges. A lot of these cybersecurity evaluations involve what's supposed to be pretend hacking into something else, because you want to see how good it is at breaking in. Because if you're really good at breaking into something, you're really good at protecting something as well.
In the OpenAI situation, in that hack, those models deliberately tried to get out of the sandbox. And Anthropic says its models didn't try to escape onto the open internet. So how did they get out?
Okay, so in Anthropic's case, they got out because Anthropic says there was a misunderstanding with a third-party provider who helps run their evaluations. Another company gave the models access in some way to the open internet. In OpenAI's case, the agent found a way to break into the open internet, to break into OpenAI's internal systems, find a way out to the open internet through those internal systems through a previously unknown vulnerability in their testing environment. So essentially they found a crack in the walls, and they managed to get out through that crack in the walls when they weren't supposed to. So slightly different, but in both cases, the agents gained access to the open internet, which then gave them access to real companies to be able to break into them.
Now, OpenAI's announcement was the first example of a concern AI experts have been warning about for years, that these autonomous AI agents could use their advanced cybersecurity skills to cause real-world harm. How is Hugging Face responding to being hacked by OpenAI's test models?
So Hugging Face has brought up a lot of very important points and debates in the AI industry right now. When they first realized they were being hacked, they didn't know where it was coming from. They knew it was a very powerful agent. They tried to use off-the-shelf products from, the major AI companies, what are called closed models, OpenAI, Anthropic, and the like. Those weren't able to help them because of those safety guardrails. So they actually turned to a Chinese open source model that was able to help them. And they're using that to highlight the need to support American and Western open source or open weight AI models that are more customizable than the closed models. We can get into open versus closed later. Hugging Face also, so far they've been working very closely with OpenAI, but they've acknowledged this is a crime. Their store was broken into. They are not right now pursuing legal action, they have told CNN. Instead, they have asked, and they want OpenAI to give a $100 million commitment to help support companies against these hacks, to help support open source. We haven't heard confirmation from OpenAI that they're going to give that money, but Hugging Face does technically have the ability to pursue legal remedies if they want to, but they're not doing so yet.
Well, I want us to hear from Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei. He told ABC's Lindsay Davis this about AI safety back in June.
How much of an onus falls on you, falls on Anthropic?
I think we're building it. The onus is on us, right? I think the government has a role in setting standards, in helping us identify and track down threats. So the government has to do its part as well, and I think the government is starting to do its part. But the onus primarily falls on us.
Now, a month later, in a statement on the hacks, Anthropic said, quote, several defense in-depth measures on both our side and our partners could have prevented these incidents or at least reduced their likelihood of occurring. Haddad, is everyone just expected to beef up their digital infrastructure to better withstand the new risks these agents pose to cybersecurity?
I mean, there's a hope that they will, but unlike when somebody is testing out a new virus or testing out the safety of a new car, there's a lot of rules and regulations over how you test those, the environment that they're in. There's no rules on the books around how you test these agents that, as you noted, that can cause real harm. Because if one of those agents, instead of being tested on trying to find a cybersecurity hole, was instead being tested on how it could hack into the cybersecurity of a bank, and then actually did escape and break into a bank or a water utility or something like that, even if it was an accident, it wasn't a bad guy, that you can imagine how that could cause a shutdown, could cause something, in real world that could be bad. The onus is on the companies when they're testing these out to make sure that it's safe. And obviously, there have been some problems. And you would hope that the biggest, best names out there in AI would be taking a more careful approach to their labs and to making sure that everything really is a tight, secure lab environment that these agents cannot escape. I totally understand that you need to give them as much of a real world scenario as possible to be able to test their capabilities. That might mean giving some sort of access to what looks like the open internet. Anthropic at least admitted that there was problems. OpenAI says there was a problem they just didn't even know existed. But they're all saying right now that they're pausing all their testing and training while they figure out exactly what happened and fix those situations.
Well, in practical terms, Hadas, what does it look like to pump the brakes on AI development, especially given the fact that it's propping up a significant portion of the U.S. economy right now?
I don't think that they're pumping the brakes on all of their development. I'm sure they're still working on their new models, but they're pumping the brakes, I think, on the cybersecurity testing at minimum, just to make sure that everything is completely sealed up. But there is a call out there to pace AI development. There was a big petition signed by more than 1,200 of the top scientists and executives, including Dario Amodei, calling on the US government to essentially create the tools that could slow down the pace of this development because of the fears that it's getting so advanced that our society just isn't able to catch up in speed for the sort of rules and regulations that we need.
Here's what OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said on a podcast last week after the hacks became public.
We may have to pace the rate of AI development to give ourselves enough time for society to harden around some of these new capability levels, and trying to figure out how we do that in a way that does not feel like regulatory capture for anyone and also does not feel like collusion among the frontier labs.
Hadas, what does it signal to you that some of the most influential figures in tech, many of whom have shaped how AI technology is being created and used right now, want to slow things down?
Well, there's two ways you can take it. If you're going to be non-cynical about it, then it's a recognition that this is a really advanced technology that can do a lot of good, but can also do a lot of harm if it's not controlled in some sort of way. I've been using this analogy where it's like, imagine the Model T was released in the early 1900s, and within a few years, let's say 5 years, Lamborghinis are on the road. But the Department of Transportation, seatbelts, airbags, none of that has been developed yet. So things are just sort of all over the place. And that's how it feels like in AI right now. It's going so fast, it's developing so quickly. The AI that we have today versus just 3 years ago is so vastly more advanced that these people have legitimate concerns because, it's beneficial for their business if they just keep developing as quickly as possible. But I think they're also concerned about bad actors. The cynical view of this, which some in the administration have, is that this is because the biggest companies out there who are dominating the market, the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, they want to be the only ones that are considered the good guys to be able to control this technology and do what they wish with it, rather than have it be a wide open field where anybody can develop as they see fit. But especially amongst the engineers and the scientists at these firms, and these are the people who are like working with this every day, there is a very legitimate fear of the power and capability of these models, not only getting into the wrong hands, the bad guys, but also like what we saw with these agents kind of gone rogue, that, a good guy could accidentally let something out and it could cause problems for us.
But what control do these companies have to put safeguards in place themselves? Like, what can they do without the help of Congress?
Listen, they can do a lot. They can, like we already said, at least just firm up their own testing environments and make that more contained. They already have a lot of control and they're exerting a lot of control. Both OpenAI and Anthropic have really, really advanced models that they have not released to the wider public. Only trusted partners have access to them. It's common in like a weapons manufacturing or a plane. Boeing doesn't just sell airplanes to anybody left or right, and a weapons manufacturer doesn't just sell, the most advanced fighter jets to anybody left or right. There's other, of course, federal rules and regulations around that, but in this case, they have trusted partners that they're giving access to these most advanced models. The problem is that there's an international arms race around AI, and other countries are creating their own that are just as good or getting there very quickly. So they do have a lot of control over it. Now, there is a call from some of these major figures, including from Google and from people like Elon Musk, who are saying, hey, we all as an industry at least need to get together and have some sort of common forum where we can talk about these things, because they are very, fierce competitors. But there's a recognition by some of them that, listen, there needs to be some coordination amongst us. Otherwise, things could go bad.
How much appetite is there in Congress or in the Trump administration to create some regulations that have teeth?
The administration has changed its tune a bit from when it first came into power. It was a very much hands-off, let them cook, just go, go, go. And then as we've seen how, especially these new models, Mythos from Anthropic and OpenAI's newest model, that's when they've started to step in and say, okay, we're going to do something where at least we can review these models so that we can at least prepare our own systems and critical infrastructure ahead of time. And we've seen the administration take action. They put an export control ban on Anthropic's model that was there for a few weeks that prevented them from releasing Mythos and Fable. They asked OpenAI to hold off on releasing its latest model because of security concerns. So the appetite seems to be growing within the administration. There is seemingly more rabid appetite in Congress, including some bipartisan proposals that have been coming out from Senator Thune and Senator Klobuchar and Senator Cruz, who are working on a bill to deal with the risks of advanced artificial intelligence. But again, that's Congress. It takes a lot of time for those things to get through, to be signed into law. And so most of the action is coming from the administration. But there are some in the AI industry who have made the comparison to COVID, who said, just like we did Operation Warp Speed and got approvals through way faster, we kind of got rid of the red tape, said, this is a life or death situation. They want the same thing for AI. We need to go just as fast.
That's Hadass Gold. She's a correspondent at CNN covering AI. Hadass, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
When we come back, we go back in time to meet someone who is testing the limits of an even earlier piece of technology: phone systems. Hey, it's Dina. Earlier, Jen White was talking about AI models finding their way into places they weren't supposed to go. Now I'm joining her to look at a much earlier version of that story. When it wasn't an AI model testing the limits of a network, it was a kid with perfect pitch and a whistle. Here's Jen.
Well, long before artificial intelligence could hack into company websites and before most Americans had even dreamed of the internet, some people spent hours each day exploring another kind of network: the telephone system. By the mid-20th century, it was one of the largest and most sophisticated communication systems ever built. In the 1950s, making a long-distance phone call relied on a series of telephone operators using manual switchboards, and it was very expensive. A daytime call from New York to Los Angeles would cost about 25 cents per minute, or about $3.47 per minute today. For a small group of people in the late 1960s and early 1970s known as phone freaks, the phone system was a puzzle to be experimented with. They found creative ways to get around the high costs associated with making calls, and one of the earliest phone freaks was a blind teenager.
The phone, to me, was the closest thing to God on earth as I was growing up.
Born Joseph Ngresia, he would become a cultural sensation for his ability to manipulate the phone system by whistling. For the latest installment of our cyber and intelligence series, Cyber Monday, how did a young man's whistles give rise to the subculture that shaped modern computer hacking? Joining us in studio is Dina Temple-Raston. She's the managing editor and host of Click Here. Hey, Dina, great to see you.
Thanks so much.
So before we get into the hacking he helped pioneer, help us understand, who was Joe Ngresia?
Well, so he was born blind in 1949, and from the time he was a little boy, he was just fascinated by the telephone. telephone. And while most children, when they hear the telephone, they just think of a ring, he actually heard something different. He heard the possibility of connection. And he was amazed that you could just pick up a receiver, dial a few numbers, and suddenly there'd be this human being on the other end of the line. And that sense of wonder that he had never really left him.
Well, that wonder led him to become a kind of expert on how telephones work. Let's listen to him in his own words.
And I remember calling up a telephone office and telling them that I couldn't get dial tone. And they said, oh, your line's probably just busy. Sometimes the line finders get overloaded. I said, well, no, why would it get dial tone right away when I pick it up again? Well, yeah, you've got a point there, I guess.
So what exactly was he trying to decipher with the phone system that really captured his curiosity?
Well, what jumped out at me was that Joe was trying to sort of take it apart, not by looking at it or taking the phone apart, by actually listening, right? And he wasn't trying to break the phone system, which, hackers do today. They try and break into networks, right? He was all about trying to understand it. And he listened to the telephone in a way that almost a musician listens to music. Every click, every tone, every little sound meant something to him. And over time, he became so familiar with all those sounds and the role they played in the network that he started noticing things that even the phone company didn't notice.
Well, Joe would later become known as Joy Bubbles, incredibly influential to the hacking subculture, but he's not a widely known figure. How did the Click Here team come across his story?
Well, it all started with this documentary that premiered in Sundance, the film festival, back in January. And it was called The Secret World of Joy Bubbles. And it was directed by Rachel Morrison and produced by Will Butler. And they have all this archival footage of Joe, or Joy Bubbles, and it introduces you to this remarkable person who somehow sits at the intersection of disability history, telecommunications, Apple, and the birth of hacking. So it was a natural story for us.
Well, we'll hear more from Rachel Morrison, the director, in a bit. But you spoke to her for Click Here, and here's what she told you about Joe's early interest in phones.
His mother showed him how to use the telephone when he was a young kid, and he was just fascinated with the fact that he could pick up the, handset and call someone and reach someone, a real human being at the end of the line.
And the phone also comforted him when his home environment turned violent.
Daddy would slam Mother and hurt her and break things, and there'd be things thrown around and lots of scary sounds and stuff at night. And sometimes I'd hug my phone up close and listen to the dial tone, the soft hum of the dial tone that was always there. What a wonderful thing a telephone is, especially during those long nights.
But in your reporting, what did you learn about how his interest in the phone system was about connection and comfort rather than just the tech itself?
Exactly. He didn't see it so much as tech as connection, right? And if you imagine at that time, in the 1950s as he was growing up, people who were blind were really set apart from the rest of society, right? They were sent to special schools. They were treated like the other. And there's the old New Yorker cartoon, right? The great thing about the internet is if you're a dog, nobody knows you're a dog. Well, in his case, nobody knew he was blind. He was just like everyone else, and that provided him with that connection.
And joining us now from New York is Rachel Morrison. She's a documentary filmmaker and archival producer and the director of the documentary Joy Bubbles. Rachel, it's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So your documentary premiered earlier this year at the Sundance Film Festival, and it chronicles Joe and Gracia's trajectory from a young boy who discovered how to manipulate the phone system to an adult who used the phone to spread joy to people around the world. How did you first come across his story?
Great question. He had an obituary in the New York Times, and that was in 2007 when he passed away. And I read it, and I had never heard of him. I did not know there were people hacking before computers. And I was just fascinated with his life and his story and his curiosity. And I thought, well, there must be a book about him, a movie, a documentary, something. And at the time, there wasn't. So I started to slowly make the documentary from there.
Rachel, part of your film is about Joe and how he manipulated the phone system, but it's also about the struggles he faced being blind at the time when many people believed that having disabilities meant being severely limited and incapable of living independently. How does the film challenge that notion?
Yeah, throughout the film, you see the ableism in society and people thinking that he couldn't have a job. There's even someone who asked him if he could put his clothes on in the morning. I mean, really horrible stuff. And he just decided he was going to be independent and that no matter what, he was going to get a job with the telephone company, which had been his lifelong dream. And even if that meant hacking into the phone to get a job, he was going to do it.
Dina, I want to learn a little bit more about how Joe created this really subculture of hacking, but how did his whistling lay that groundwork for hacking and experimenting with technology?
Well, he had perfect pitch. And he heard this tone in the phone, and without even really thinking about it, he copied it. Mm-hmm. And he whistles it, and all of a sudden the line drops and starts again. And for any of the rest of us, we would have thought it was a glitch, right? But that's not how his mind worked. The way his mind worked was, why did that happen? And so he did it again, and it happened again, and it happened again. And he learned this when he was a child, right? And so this was his little powerful secret, his superpower. And then he goes to college, and he's with all these kids who aren't paying much attention to him and are always thinking that they need to help him. And he mentions to one of them, hey, I can get you free long distance.
And let's listen to how he remembers his growing popularity with students who wanted his help to call home for free.
One other student heard about it, and another one, and another one. One night it was about 40 people, wanting phone calls.
So how did this work, Dina? How did he help people make phone calls?
Well, basically what they would do is they would dial a local number, and then he would whistle before it was over, and it would drop the line. And then the phone company and the phone itself just thought they were still on a local line, and then they would dial the long distance. And we were talking about this. It was incredibly expensive to dial long distance. I used to have to call my parents and do a, collect phone call, and then they would call me back.
It's Dina, call me back.
Yeah,
I remember
exactly.
that, yeah.
Sorry, Sandy's not here. And it was not just something that made him popular because it was sort of a party trick. It was a very, very practical thing that he could offer these students who, until that moment, hadn't paid much attention to him.
Well, Rachel, his sense of hearing and his ability to mimic sounds meant that people were coming to him for help. And we also learned in the documentary that he became an enemy of the telecom systems, and that despite this deep passion he had for the telephone and his knowledge, he did struggle to find a job as a phone operator. How did Joe and other people who they call themselves phone freaks fight operators like AT&T and the monopoly they held on phone calls?
Well, they were the first to find this major security flaw in the network, which the phone company had not planned for, which is that the signal used to control the system and your voice went down the same telephone line. So, yeah, that was a huge security flaw that they discovered. And it's interesting because when he was finally hired by the telephone company, he was essentially hired as a white hat hacker. And he was working for the telephone company as a hacker, trying to vet out security flaws for them.
Well, we mentioned this larger subculture of, they call themselves phone freaks, Dina, and they were experimenting with the phone network in the late 60s and early 70s. What kind of technological progress did that experimentation yield?
Well, in the end, they were basically people who were trying to break a technological system. I mean, almost like we saw those earlier in the show when you were talking about AI agents breaking into the system. This was the same thing. It wasn't necessarily to do harm. It was actually just to see what the limits of it were, what the rules of it were. And so phone freaks, originally there was Adrian Lamo, there was Kevin Mitnick, there were all these people who would later go on to be really well-known computer hackers. But before there were computers, there were phone freaks. And one of the interesting things about this is that some very famous phone freaks ended up becoming legion in the computer world. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had actually heard about joy bubbles and how he had whistled into the phone and gotten free long distance. So they actually built something called a blue box to do that.
Well, Clifford emailed us about that, saying before founding Apple, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs built and sold blue boxes, electronic devices designed to generate precise audio tones, specifically a 2600 hertz tone that tricked telephone switching systems into granting free long-distance calls. And so it raises this question about, yes, he was hacking the system, but he has inspired also some of the most influential tech pioneers of our day.
Yeah, they built a joy bubbles in a box, basically, because they didn't have perfect pitch. And Steve Jobs at one point told his biographer, had there not been the blue box, there might not have been Apple. And Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak weren't really trying to just break the system. They were curious. Their curiosity is what drove them. And for a lot of hackers, white hat hackers and black hat hackers, the beginning motivation is curiosity. And a hacker once told me the only difference between a white hat hacker and a black hat hacker is intention. It's not skill.
Rachel, as you were working on this documentary and uncovering Joe's story, what did you learn about how he thought about this chapter in his life when he learned how to hack the phone system and eventually create a subculture?
Yeah, this was huge for him. I mean, it was the first time that he really was able to build a community around him. When he got in trouble in college, there was a whole media sensation around it. And it was through that other people across the country who had also discovered this independently figured out that there were other people, and they came to Joy Bubbles, and so they all met each other through him.
Well, while he's in college, Joe's phone hacking talents draw international attention. He's profiled in Esquire magazine. Dina, what did that mean for his profile and who he was able to reach with his story?
Well, all of a sudden it became a movement, right? People who wanted to do the same sort of thing that he was doing. I think what's sort of sweet about it, though, is there's a core goodness, a gooiness to him that goes far beyond the phone freaking. I mean, when the phone freaking sort of caught on, he was less interested in that and started getting interested in connection instead. He started calling people all over the world just to talk and make that connection. He had a phone line that people could call in which he would tell stories or he'd recite poetry. So really different than Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, who went on to make Apple, right? This was just a really sweet guy who had this core of humanity that it comes out in Rachel's film. It's just this core of humanity that it's really hard not to love.
Well, Rachel, as Dina alludes to there, later in life, he changed his name to Joy Bubbles and decided to create this phone hotline designed to comfort other people all the way at the back of the phone book. How did it work?
So he decided, because he was always just a total genius, that he was going to have a telephone number called the Zizzerific Fun Line. So it was terrific, spelled with 4 Z's. The idea being that it would be the very last entry in the telephone book. And I talked to people who called the line asking them, how did you discover this? And if you think of an old, heavy telephone book, and you're sort of sitting with it and it's flopping around, sometimes it'll just open to that last page and people look down and said, what is this? And like you said, it was this wonderful phone line where you would call in and he would record on his answering machine these essentially proto podcasts where he would just talk about things in his life. He loved noises and he loved telling stories about his childhood and all sorts of things. You know, after his sort of creating community through the phone freaks, later in life, he was creating community through this telephone line, and people would leave him messages, and sometimes he would pick up the phone, and he made friends that way.
Now, Joe was a very complex man. He also had a very difficult life. He survived childhood sexual abuse, bullying, a violent home. And in the 1980s, he also claimed to have reverted back to his childhood. He would say he was 5 years old until his death in 2007. Rachel, how did you decide to approach those facets of his life in the documentary?
Yeah, it's a very interesting shift in his life to be this person who really wanted to work for the telephone company and be an adult and fight the ableism in his life. And then he decides that he's going to deal with the trauma that he experienced as a kid by going back and reliving his childhood and then also legally changing his name to Joy Bubbles. I think that it's complicated, but the phone runs throughout his entire life. And, like I said, it was always a way for him to build community.
Yeah, Dina, I want you to connect some dots for us, because when we think about the telephone, and I'm thinking back to my childhood and the landline and the cord that you try to stretch to the other room so you can kind of have a semi-private conversation. And then we think about the power that our phones, like our cell phones, have right now. We think about the rapidly evolving development of AI. Where do you see the connection?
Well, I think it's a progression, right? And also what's interesting about it is that we keep coming back to these same themes, right? Facebook was supposed to be about connection, right? AI is supposed to be to help you do your job better, so maybe you have more free time, so there's more connection. Technology is always supposed to be making our lives easier. It doesn't always happen in the beginning,
right?
But it's supposed to be used as a vehicle to improve our lives. And in that beginning part of it, there's always a snafu. I think that's one of the themes that always comes up, right? So you find a vulnerability in the telephone. You find vulnerability in the networks that computers are connected to. Now we're finding vulnerabilities that AI is discovering that we never knew about. So we've told this story before, so same story, different technology.
Is there a lesson, though, for us as we try to grapple with this evolving technology in our lives today?
Well, there's always this other side that we don't think about, right? We always think we build something and it must be great. And there's always this vulnerability, this thing we didn't think about that comes back to haunt us. We're seeing it now with these latest AI hacks with OpenAI and Anthropic. It didn't occur to them that AI would try to link a bunch of 0 days together and break out. It's a failure of imagination. And I think maybe that's the lesson that's in all of this, is that we have these technologies, but we don't think how they might be misused soon enough. We just embrace them.
Well, that's Dina Temple-Raston. Also with us today, Rachel Morrison. She's a documentary filmmaker, archival producer, and director of Joy Bubbles. Rachel, if people are interested in exploring Joe's story through your documentary, where can they find it?
It's playing at film festivals through the end of the year, and it will have a theatrical release next year. So just watch out for it.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing that on the big screen. Today's producer was Lauren Hamilton. Megan Dietrich is the executive producer of Click Here, and Zach Hirsch is the senior producer. And this program comes to you from WAMU, part of American University in Washington, distributed by NPR. I'm Jen White. This is 1A.
That was my conversation with 1A host Jen White and filmmaker Rachel Morrison. And maybe that's the thread running through all of this. From a kid with a whistle finding a way into the phone system to AI models finding their way out of a sandbox. Technology has a way of doing things its creators never quite imagined. You can hear the full conversation at WAMU.org. I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and this is Click Here. Here's what happened in the tech world this week. It's Tuesday, August 11th. Hackers have been probing something most of us never even think about: the computers that help keep our drinking water flowing.
Minnesota reported 30 of its state water systems faced a coordinated cyber attack.
Federal investigators now say water utilities in at least a dozen states have been targeted. Michigan says it's the latest victim, after 9 of its water systems reported what looks like cyber incidents. In some cases, operators lost water pressure. Others dealt with flooding. So far, officials say drinking water is still safe, but investigators say the attacks are exploiting internet-connected equipment inside treatment plants. The concern isn't just one hacked device, it's that one connected controller can become a doorway into an entire facility. Federal officials still haven't publicly attributed the attack, but intelligence officials suspect Iran is behind it. Across the country, water utilities are racing to lock their systems down before the next attack. TikTok's American operations are shrinking.
TikTok will close its Nashville office to streamline other operations and better align their teams for the future.
This week, TikTok eliminated roughly 250 jobs in Nashville, including people who were members of their content moderation team. Employees learned that they were losing their jobs by email and were locked out of company systems almost immediately. The company hasn't provided an explanation for the cutbacks, but they come just months after ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, spun off its American operation to satisfy a national security law. The layoffs also point to something happening across the tech industry. Fewer people making decisions, more software doing the work. Researchers wanted to see how far an AI agent would go if you let it slip the leash. Turns out, pretty far.
You know how scammers will try and use a fake identity to trick you? Well, now we have an AI agent doing the same thing.
During a government security evaluation, researchers disabled the guardrails on Anthropic's Mythos 5 model and gave it broad autonomy. According to the UK's AI Security Institute, the model created fake GitHub accounts, sent out phishing emails to developers, and planted malicious code in an open-source project. When someone caught it, the model allegedly tried to cover its tracks by rewriting its own history and manufacturing fake support for its changes. Researchers stress this happened during a controlled test designed to push the system beyond its limits. But still, they say the deception was more sophisticated than they thought it would be. It's the third report in the space of a few weeks of advanced AI agents taking unauthorized actions during safety evaluations. And finally, scientists studying marmots, those rotund little mountain rodents, need money. So they went where the subscribers are.
Long-term studies are really important, and they're undervalued. OnlyFans is a way for people to go and monetize stuff. We're not trying to sexualize marmots.
Biologist Dan Blumstein and his students launched Only Marms, a decidedly G-rated OnlyFans account featuring yellow-bellied marmots in Colorado. The goal is serious. Researchers are trying to keep one of the world's longest-running studies of wild mammals going after federal research funds were cut. The program has already raised about $5,000. And later this month, fans will vote during what's being called Fat Marmot Week, body-shaming little woodland mammals in the name of science. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News and PRX. Today's show was written and produced by Megan Dietrich, Sean Powers, Erica Gutta, Zach Hirsch, and Maya Fawaz. It was edited by Karen Duffin and Sarah Cavedo, and fact-checked by Darren Ankrum. Original music is by Ben Livingston, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, our illustrator is Megan Goff, and our sound designers and engineers are Jake Cook and Jesse Neiswanger. I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and thanks for listening. Here's what happened in the tech world this week. It's Tuesday, August 11th. Hackers have been probing something most of us never even think about: the computers that help keep our drinking water flowing.
Minnesota reported 30 of its state water systems faced a coordinated cyber attack.
Federal investigators now say water utilities in at least a dozen states have been targeted. Michigan says it's the latest victim, after 9 of its water systems reported what looks like cyber incidents. In some cases, operators lost water pressure. Others dealt with flooding. So far, officials say drinking water is still safe, but investigators say the attacks are exploiting internet-connected equipment inside treatment plants. The concern isn't just one hacked device, it's that one connected controller can become a doorway into an entire facility. Federal officials still haven't publicly attributed the attack, but intelligence officials suspect Iran is behind it. Across the country, water utilities are racing to lock their systems down before the next attack. TikTok's American operations are shrinking.
TikTok will close its Nashville office to streamline other operations and better align their teams for the future.
This week, TikTok eliminated roughly 250 jobs in Nashville, including people who were members of their content moderation team. Employees learned that they were losing their jobs by email and were locked out of company systems almost immediately. The company hasn't provided an explanation for the cutbacks, but they come just months after ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, spun off its American operation to satisfy a national security law. The layoffs also point to something happening across the tech industry. Fewer people making decisions, more software doing the work. Researchers wanted to see how far an AI agent would go if you let it slip the leash. Turns out, pretty far.
You know how scammers will try and use a fake identity to trick you? Well, now we have an AI agent doing the same thing.
During a government security evaluation, researchers disabled the guardrails on Anthropic's Mythos 5 model and gave it broad autonomy. According to the UK's AI Security Institute, the model created fake GitHub accounts, sent out phishing emails to developers, and planted malicious code in an open-source project. When someone caught it, the model allegedly tried to cover its tracks by rewriting its own history and manufacturing fake support for its changes. Researchers stress this happened during a controlled test designed to push the system beyond its limits. But still, they say the deception was more sophisticated than they thought it would be. It's the third report in the space of a few weeks of advanced AI agents taking unauthorized actions during safety evaluations. And finally, scientists studying marmots, those rotund little mountain rodents, need money. So they went where the subscribers are.
I came back to the lab one day and said, hey, what do you think about starting an OnlyFans account?
Biologist Dan Blumstein and his students launched Only Marms, a decidedly G-rated OnlyFans account featuring yellow-bellied marmots in Colorado. The goal is serious. Researchers are trying to keep one of the world's longest-running studies of wild mammals going after federal research funds were cut. The program has already raised about $5,000. And later this month, fans will vote during what's being called Fat Marmot Week, body-shaming little woodland mammals in the name of science. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News and PRX. Today's show was written and produced by Megan Dietrich, Sean Powers, Erica Gutta, Zach Hirsch, and Maya Fawaz. It was edited by Karen Duffin and Sarah Cavedo and fact-checked by Darren Ankrum. Original music is by Ben Livingston with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, our illustrator is Megan Goff, and our sound designers and engineers are Jake Cook and Jesse Neiswanger. I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and thanks for listening.